The rain streaked down the cafe windows as Rochelle Bennett, a beautiful, slender black woman and talented architect, sat frozen in her chair, tears burning in her eyes but refusing to fall. Her ex-boyfriend Brandon had just said the words that would shatter her in front of everyone. "Your dark skin just didn't fit the family photo. My mother said you clashed with our winter white theme. It was purely aesthetic, Rochelle. Like interior design. You wouldn't put a dark couch in an all-white room." The cafe went silent. Every eye turned away. No one defended her. No one spoke. They just let it happen. But someone was watching. At a corner table sat a man who would change everything. Kang Min-jae, a Korean mafia boss with dragon tattoos crawling up his neck, ice-cold eyes that missed nothing, and a sister's grave he visited every year. A sister who had killed herself after being told her Asian features didn't belong in her white fiancé's family photographs. He approached Rochelle's table and placed a black business card in front of her trembling hands. "If you want that man to understand consequences," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of buried rage, "call me." Rochelle stared at the card, at this dangerous stranger offering her something the law never could: justice, vengeance, power. She didn't call. Not that day. But when Brandon sabotaged her biggest career opportunity with the same racist cruelty, when he smiled as he destroyed her professional reputation, when the world proved once again that her excellence meant nothing against his privilege, she made a choice that would destroy him completely. What happened next revealed a truth about revenge that neither of them expected. A truth about what we become when we fight monsters. A truth about whether destroying your enemy can ever truly heal your wounds. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The rain had not yet begun to fall on that October afternoon when Rochelle Bennett pushed open the glass door of Meridian Cafe, her leather tote bag heavy against her shoulder, her mind still tangled in the architectural renderings she'd been perfecting for 3 sleepless nights. The cafe smelled of burnt espresso and cinnamon, that particular scent of gentrified comfort that had replaced the old barber shop that once stood on this corner. She didn't notice it anymore. This place had become her second office, her refuge, the one space where she could spread her laptop and sketches across a corner table and pretend, for a few hours, that she belonged in this neighborhood of exposed brick and reclaimed wood. She ordered her usual, black coffee, no sugar, and settled into the table by the window, the one with the wobbly leg she'd learned to compensate for by sliding her portfolio underneath. The autumn light filtered through the glass in golden sheets, and for a moment, just a moment, Rochelle allowed herself to believe that today might be ordinary. That today, the world might let her simply exist. Little did she know that across the cafe, in the corner booth shadowed by the hanging plants and vintage Edison bulbs, a man was watching her with the quiet intensity of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people's souls in the space between their words and their silences. Kang Min-jae had not intended to stay long at Meridian Cafe. His meeting with the district supervisor had concluded early. The man had been appropriately terrified, appropriately compliant, appropriately aware that certain shipments would continue moving through the port without unnecessary inspections. Min-jae had learned long ago that power was not about volume or theatrics. Power was about knowing exactly which words to whisper, and to whom, and watching grown men crumble like ash in your palm without ever raising your voice. He had ordered green tea he had no intention of drinking. He was waiting for his driver to circle back after dropping off a package to the accountant 3 blocks east. The cafe was public, neutral, the kind of place where a man in an expensive suit drew no particular attention in a city where half the population wore expensive suits like armor against their own inadequacies. But then he saw her. the black woman with the natural hair that caught the afternoon light like a crown, her fingers moving across her laptop keyboard with the precision of someone who had learned that perfection was the only acceptable standard, that anything less would be used as evidence of her unworthiness. Min-jae recognized that posture. He had seen it in his sister's shoulders during those final months. That terrible straightness, that refusal to bend even as the world pressed down with all its casual cruelty. He sipped his cooling tea and watched Rochelle work, and something in his chest tightened with a familiarity he had spent 5 years trying to bury. The door chimed. Min-jae's eyes shifted, a reflex honed by years of survival, and he clocked the man immediately. White, early 30s, expensive haircut, that particular stride of someone who had never been told no in any language that mattered. The woman beside him was blonde, painfully thin, wearing an engagement ring that could have fed a family for 6 months. They were laughing about something, that kind of intimate laughter that excluded the rest of the world with surgical precision. The man's gaze swept the cafe and landed on Rochelle. His smile widened. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Rochelle. The man's voice carried across the cafe with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding space, to making his presence the center of any room he entered. What a coincidence. Rochelle's fingers froze on her keyboard. Min-jae watched her shoulders stiffen, watched the brief flash of something, pain, fear, recognition, cross her face before she composed it into polite neutrality. She looked up and Min-jae saw her smile. That terrible, small smile that was not a smile at all but a shield. Brandon, she said quietly. Hi. The man, Brandon, did not pass by. Little did Rochelle know he had no intention of passing by. He had seen her, and something in him, some small and vicious thing that fed on others' discomfort, had awakened and demanded satisfaction. Melissa, honey, Brandon said to the blonde woman, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, loud enough to draw eyes. This is Rochelle, the girl I dated before you. You remember I told you about her? Melissa smiled uncertainly. She had kind eyes, Min-jae noticed. She did not want to be part of whatever was happening. But she loved Brandon, or thought she did, and love made people complicit in cruelties they would never commit alone. Of course, Melissa said softly. Nice to meet you. Rochelle nodded. Congratulations on your engagement. Her voice was steady. Min-jae admired that. But he also heard what lay beneath the steadiness. The tremor she was crushing with sheer will. The humiliation she was swallowing like poison. Thanks, Brandon said, and then he leaned slightly toward Melissa, as if sharing a confidence, but his voice remained at that same carrying volume. You know that photo I showed you? The one from my family's Christmas in Aspen? Min-jae felt his fingers curl slowly around his teacup. Rochelle was so upset when my mother asked her to... How did Mom put it? Oh, right. To step aside for the official family portrait. Brandon laughed, a casual, easy laugh. Mom said her skin tone was too dark and didn't match the family's color palette. We had this whole winter white theme going, you know? Silver and cream and white. And Rochelle's skin, well, it just clashed. The cafe had gone quiet, not the dramatic silence of a movie, but the real, terrible silence of strangers witnessing cruelty and choosing to look away, to pretend they hadn't heard, to protect themselves from the moral obligation of intervention. Rochelle's hand trembled. Just once, just barely, but Min-jae saw it. Brandon, Melissa whispered, her face flushing. Maybe we should... I'm just saying it wasn't personal, Brandon continued, leaning now on Rochelle's table with a familiarity that made Min-jae's vision narrow. It was purely aesthetic. Your dark skin just didn't fit the family photo. You understand, right, Rochelle? It's like interior design. You wouldn't put a dark couch in an all-white room. It disrupts the visual flow. He smiled at her, a genuine smile. He believed, Min-jae realized with cold clarity, that he was being reasonable, that he was explaining something obvious, something Rochelle should have understood all along. Rochelle's eyes were bright, too bright. She blinked rapidly, and Min-jae watched a single tear escape and track down her cheek before she angrily wiped it away. "We should go," she whispered. "No hard feelings, though," Brandon said cheerfully, straightening up. "I'm sure you'll find someone who doesn't mind. Someone more compatible with your aesthetic." He took Melissa's hand and walked toward the counter, laughing about something, already having moved on, already having forgotten the small violence he'd just committed in the space between ordering a latte and walking out the door. Rochelle sat frozen. Her laptop screen had gone dark. Her coffee was untouched. Her whole body was so still that Min-jae wondered if she was even breathing. Around her, the cafe resumed its normal rhythm. Conversations picked up. Espresso machines hissed. Someone laughed at a video on their phone. The world continued, indifferent, as it always did. But Min-jae could not look away. He saw his sister in that moment, saw Ji-won sitting at the kitchen table in their childhood home in Seoul, holding the phone, her face blank with shock as her fiancé's mother explained, very politely, very reasonably, that the wedding could not proceed because Ji-won's oriental features would look out of place in the family photographs. That it wasn't racism, of course, just aesthetics, just preference, just the way things were. Ji-won had hung up the phone and smiled at him. "It's fine, Oppa," she'd said. "I understand." 3 weeks later, Min-jae had found her in the bathtub. He stood up. His body moved before his mind fully decided. He walked across the cafe, 3 tables, 12 steps, an eternity compressed into seconds, and stopped beside Rochelle's table. She didn't look up. "That man," Min-jae said quietly, his Korean accent softening the edges of his English. "Has he always treated you this way?" Rochelle's head snapped up. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry now, burning with a fury she was too well trained to release. She stared at him, this tall Asian man with tattoos crawling up his neck like dark vines, with eyes like black ice, with a stillness that spoke of violence held on a very short leash. "Excuse me?" she said. "I asked," Min-jae repeated, his voice calm, factual. "If that man has always treated you with such disrespect." "It's none of your business," Rochelle said, but her voice cracked on the last word. "You're correct," Min-jae agreed. "It is not my business, but I am choosing to make it so." He reached into his jacket. Rochelle flinched slightly, and he slowed his movement deliberately and withdrew a matte black business card. He placed it on her table beside her closed laptop. The card bore only 2 things, a name in English and Korean, Kang Min-jae, and a phone number. "If you want that man to understand the consequences of his words," Min-jae said, "call me." "Consequences?" Rochelle whispered. "What are you talking about?" Min-jae looked toward the counter where Brandon was laughing with the barista, utterly unaware, utterly comfortable in his certainty that the world would continue to bend to his will. "I am talking about justice," Min-jae said simply. "I don't even know who you are," Rochelle said. "No," Min-jae agreed. "But I know men like him, and I know what they deserve." He turned to leave, then paused. "My sister," he said, not looking at Rochelle, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "She loved a man whose family could not see her value. She believed them when they said she was not enough. She died believing that lie." Rochelle's breath caught. "I will not watch another woman be erased," Min-jae said. "Not again. Not while I have the power to prevent it." He walked out of the cafe, The door chimed behind him. His driver was waiting at the curb, the black Mercedes idling in the loading zone with the kind of impunity that money and fear provided in equal measure. Min-jae slid into the back seat and stared out the tinted window at the cafe, at the woman still sitting frozen at her table, at the small black card lying beside her trembling hand. "Where to, Mr. Kang?" the driver asked. "The usual place," Min-jae said quietly. As the car pulled away, he did not look back. But he knew, with the same certainty he knew that the sun would set and rise and set again, that Rochelle Bennett would call. Because some humiliations were too deep to swallow. Some wounds demanded more than silent dignity. And some men, like Brandon Whitmore, had gone too long without learning that the world was full of people more dangerous than their privilege could protect them from. Little did Brandon know, as he walked out of that cafe laughing at his own cruel joke, that he had just sealed his fate in the space between a dark-skinned comment and a stranger's cold rage. The rain began to fall. 3 days passed like wounded animals dragging themselves across Rochelle Bennett's consciousness. She did not call the number on the black card. She told herself she would throw it away. She told herself that the man in the cafe, that dangerous, tattooed stranger with eyes like a winter lake, was exactly the kind of complication her life did not need. But she did not throw the card away. It sat on her kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker, a small rectangle of matte black that seemed to pulse with possibility every time she walked past it. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that men like Kang Min-jae did not offer help without expecting something in return, that violence only begat more violence, that she was a professional woman, an architect, someone who solved problems with blueprints and calculations, not with phone calls to mysterious men who spoke of consequences and justice in the same breath. But on the 4th morning, when she opened her email and saw the meeting confirmation from Whitmore and Associates Corporate Law, her hands began to shake. Brandon's firm. The client she'd been courting for 3 months. The Riverside Development Project, a $12 million luxury residential complex, had hired Brandon's firm as their legal representation. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon. Mandatory attendance for all design consultants. Rochelle stared at her laptop screen until the words blurred. She thought about calling in sick. She thought about withdrawing from the project entirely. She thought about 1,000 different ways to avoid sitting in a conference room with the man who had publicly compared her skin to a design flaw. But she had rent to pay. She had a reputation to build. She had spent too many years clawing her way into rooms that didn't want her to surrender now because of one cruel man's presence. So she dressed in her best suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, armor disguised as professionalism. She twisted her natural curls into a low bun. She applied her makeup with the precision of war paint. She looked at herself in the mirror and practiced her smile until it looked almost real. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. Her reflection did not look convinced. Little did she know that across the city, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, Kang Min-jae was receiving a very different kind of morning report. "The woman hasn't called," said Park Jin-ho, Min-jae's second in command, a compact man with graying temples and knuckles scarred from decades of enforcing organizational will. He stood beside Min-jae's desk with the kind of relaxed alertness that came from 20 years of surviving in a world where hesitation meant death. Min-jae did not look up from the shipping manifests spread across his mahogany desk. "I did not expect her to." "Then why give her your private number?" "Because some decisions require time," Min-jae said calmly, signing off on a document with his platinum pen. "She will call when the pain becomes greater than her pride." Jin-ho was quiet for a moment. You're thinking about Ji-won again. Min Jae's hand stilled on the paper. I think about Ji-won every day. This woman is not your sister. No, Min Jae agreed softly. But perhaps she could be someone's sister. Someone's daughter. Someone who deserves to exist in this world without being told her skin is a flaw in someone else's aesthetic vision. Jin-ho sighed. He had known Min Jae since they were teenagers running protection rackets in Busan's fish markets. Before the organization grew. Before the money became legitimate on paper and more dangerous in practice. Before Min Jae's sister had fallen in love with the wrong man and paid for it with her life. If she calls, Jin-ho said, what will you do? Min Jae looked up then, and his eyes held that particular emptiness that Jin-ho had learned to recognize as the precursor to calculated violence. I will give her a choice, Min Jae said. What she does with it will reveal who she truly is. At precisely 2 o'clock, Rochelle walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of the Whitmore & Associates building. The room smelled of expensive cologne and leather portfolio cases. 6 people were already seated around the long table. The clients, their financial advisors, their project manager. And Brandon Whitmore, sitting at the head of the table like a king presiding over his court. He looked up when she entered, and his face broke into that smile. That terrible, friendly smile that made her stomach turn. Rochelle, he said warmly. So glad you could make it. Everyone, this is Rochelle Bennett, the architect I told you about. Very talented, despite her unconventional background. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rochelle forced her smile wider. Thank you for the opportunity to present my designs. She set up her presentation materials with hands that trembled only slightly. She walked them through the renderings, the clean lines of the residential units, the integration of green space, the sustainable materials that would make the project eligible for tax incentives. She spoke clearly, confidently, every word rehearsed and polished. And Brandon interrupted her. Not loudly, not obviously, but with the surgical precision of someone who knew exactly how to undermine without appearing to do so. Interesting color choices, he said when she showed the interior palette. Very earthy. Dark browns, deep reds. Is that a cultural preference? Rochelle's jaw tightened. These are the trending palettes in luxury residential design, according to, I'm sure, Brandon said smoothly. But our clients tend to prefer lighter, more open aesthetics. Whites, creams, soft grays, more universally appealing. You understand. The clients nodded. They looked at Rochelle's renderings with newly skeptical eyes. She continued presenting. She showed them the community spaces, the rooftop gardens, the innovative water collection systems. Brandon leaned back in his chair. This is all very ambitious, but do you have the experience to execute a project of this scale? I mean, no offense, but looking at your portfolio, most of your work has been smaller, more urban projects. This is luxury development. Different clientele, different expectations. I have the qualifications and the team to... I'm sure you do, Brandon said kindly, so kindly as if he were trying to protect her from her own limitations. I'm just thinking about what's best for our clients. They're investing a significant amount of money. They need someone with a proven track record in this specific market segment. One of the clients cleared his throat. Perhaps we should consider other design firms as well, just to compare options. Rochelle felt the project slipping away like water through her fingers. She tried to salvage it. She showed them cost projections, timeline estimates, references from previous clients. But Brandon had poisoned the room with such subtle expertise that every word she spoke seemed to confirm his implications. That she was inexperienced, unproven, not quite right for their vision. The meeting ended 30 minutes early. We'll be in touch, the lead client said without meeting her eyes. Rochelle gathered her materials in silence. The room emptied until only she and Brandon remained. "Don't take it personally," Brandon said, standing by the window, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual success. "This business isn't for everyone. Maybe you'd be happier doing residential renovations, smaller projects, something more suited to your strengths." Rochelle looked at him, really looked at him. At his expensive suit and his confident posture and his utter, complete certainty that he was entitled to crush her without consequence. "Why do you hate me?" she asked quietly. Brandon looked genuinely surprised. "Hate you? Rochelle, I don't hate you. I'm trying to help you. You're in over your head in this market. I'm doing you a favor by being honest." "You humiliated me in that cafe." "I told the truth," Brandon said simply. "My mother did ask you to step out of the photo. That happened. If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my fault." He walked toward the door, then paused. "You know what your problem is, Rochelle? You think everything is about race. But sometimes people just aren't good enough. Sometimes the world doesn't owe you a seat at the table just because you think you deserve one." He left. Rochelle stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by glass walls that made her feel like an exhibit, something to be observed and judged and found wanting. She packed her materials. She walked to the elevator. She rode down 14 floors in silence, her reflection multiplying in the polished metal walls. 100 versions of herself, all wearing the same expression of barely contained devastation. She made it to her car before she started crying. Not gentle tears, not dignified sadness, but the kind of crying that came from a place deeper than one humiliation, deeper than one lost contract. A place where every microaggression and polite exclusion and casual cruelty she had ever endured lived together in a vast, aching wound that never quite healed. She cried until her throat hurt, until her carefully applied makeup ran in dark streams down her face, until the fury and helplessness exhausted themselves into a cold, clear determination. She reached into her purse. She pulled out the black business card. Her hands were steady now, steady with a terrible certainty that some things could not be endured. Some men could not be allowed to continue destroying women with their casual cruelties. Some pain demanded more than silent dignity. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. "This is Kang," said the voice on the other end, calm and unsurprised, as if he had been waiting for this call since the moment he placed the card on her table. "He did it again," Rochelle said, her voice hoarse from crying. "He destroyed me in front of clients. He sabotaged my presentation. He smiled while doing it." Silence on the other end. Not empty silence, but the kind of silence that held calculations and decisions being made at speeds too fast for words. "Where are you?" Min-jae asked. "In my car, downtown, outside his building." "Stay there. I'm sending someone to bring you to me. We need to talk about what you truly want." "I want him to hurt," Rochelle whispered, and the words felt like fire in her mouth, like something dark and ancient rising from a place she hadn't known existed inside her. "I want him to feel what he's made me feel. I want him destroyed." Another silence. Then Min-jae's voice, soft and terrible. "Then we will destroy him. But first, you need to understand what that truly means, what it will cost, what it will make you." "I don't care," Rochelle said. "You will," Min-jae replied. "Everyone does. But by then, it will be too late." 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up beside her car. The driver, an older Korean man with scars on his knuckles and eyes that had seen too much, opened the back door without speaking. Rochelle looked at the open door. She thought about her mother, who had raised her to take the high road, to be twice as good, to prove her worth through excellence and dignity. She thought about every motivational quote about success being the best revenge. But none of those things had stopped Brandon from humiliating her. Twice. None of those things had protected her from a world that saw her skin as a design flaw. She got into the car. Little did she know, as the Mercedes pulled away from the curb and headed toward the harbor district, toward a penthouse where a dangerous man waited with tools of destruction she could barely imagine, that this decision would change her in ways she could not yet comprehend. That vengeance was a mirror that showed you your own face transformed into something you would not recognize. That some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. The rain had returned, streaking the car windows, turning the city lights into watercolor blurs of red and gold and cold, cold white. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of a building that officially housed import-export offices, shipping consultants, and various corporate entities whose actual business would not survive daylight scrutiny. Rochelle stepped out of the private elevator into a space that defied her expectations. Not the dark, smoke-filled room of movie gangsters, but an expanse of pale wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, minimalist furniture in shades of cream and charcoal, and along one wall, an art collection that included what she recognized with her trained eye as an original Lee Bay charcoal monochrome worth more than her annual income. Kang Min-jae stood by the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears the building was crying for all the sins committed within its walls. He turned when she entered. In the cafe, he had seemed dangerous. Here, in his own domain, he seemed inevitable, like gravity, like the ocean's tide, like something that simply existed beyond moral judgment or human resistance. "Miss Bennet," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." "You said you could destroy him," Rochelle said without preamble. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I need to know if you meant it." Min-jae gestured to a leather chair positioned before a glass desk that held only a laptop and a single photograph in a silver frame. Rochelle sat. She could see the photograph from her angle. A young woman, Korean, perhaps 20 years old, with a bright smile and eyes full of hope that the world had not yet taken from her. "My sister," Min-jae said, following her gaze. "Ji-won. She would have been 30 this year." He sat across from Rochelle, and for the first time, she saw past the controlled exterior to something raw and unhealed beneath. "She fell in love with an American man," Min-jae continued, his voice flat, factual, as if reciting a story that had been told so many times it no longer belonged to him. "A white man from a wealthy family. He proposed. She was happy. Happier than I had ever seen her. She called me from Los Angeles, crying with joy, saying she had finally found her place in the world." He paused. Rochelle waited, afraid to breathe, afraid to break whatever fragile thread he was spinning. His family rejected her. Not violently, not with screaming or drama, just politely. They explained that her features were too oriental, that she would look out of place in family photographs, that their social circle would find it awkward. They offered her money to walk away. Rochelle felt something crack inside her chest. She refused the money, Min-jae said. She loved him. She thought love would be enough. But he chose his family. He called her 3 weeks before the wedding and ended it. He said he was sorry. He said he still cared for her. He said she would find someone more appropriate for her culture. Min-jae's hands, resting on the desk, curled slowly into fists. I found her in the bathtub of her apartment 2 days later. She had taken pills. She left a note that said only 3 words. I am sorry. As if her existence was something to apologize for. Rochelle's eyes burned. I'm so sorry. I buried my sister, Minjae said, and now his voice carried an edge like broken glass. And I made a promise over her grave that I would never again stand by and watch men destroy women for the crime of not fitting into their narrow visions of acceptable beauty. That I would use the power I had built, power that exists outside the law, yes, power that civilized people pretend does not exist, to bring consequences to men who believe they are beyond consequences. He opened the laptop and turned it toward Rochelle. The screen showed a dossier. Photographs, documents, spreadsheets, emails. Brandon Whitmore's entire life, dissected and displayed like a biological specimen. I have spent the last 4 days learning everything about the man who humiliated you, Minjae said. Would you like to know what I discovered? Rochelle stared at the screen. At Brandon's face smiling from a dozen different photographs, at charity galas, at his law firm's annual dinner, at his engagement party. She wanted to look away. She could not look away. Yes, she whispered. Minjae tapped a key. A financial spreadsheet appeared. Brandon Whitmore works for his family's law firm. They represent corporate clients, real estate developers, investment groups, hedge funds. What those clients do not know is that the Whitmore firm has been laundering money for 3 years. Not for dramatic criminals, for boring, wealthy criminals. Real estate investors who need to hide income from the IRS. Developers who funnel bribe money to city officials. The kind of white-collar crime that sends people to federal prison for 15 years. He tapped another key. Emails appeared. Brandon himself has facilitated at least 47 instances of what the federal government would classify as wire fraud and tax evasion. He is very good at it. Very careful. But not careful enough. Rochelle felt her pulse quicken. You're saying he's a criminal? I'm saying he's a criminal who believes his privilege will protect him. Minjae corrected. Men like him always believe that. They are usually correct, but not when someone like me decides otherwise. Another keystroke. Bank statements appeared. His family's wealth, the money that allows them to exclude people who don't match their aesthetic, was built on systematic exploitation. His grandfather's real estate empire was constructed by forcing Black families out of their homes through predatory lending and redlining. The fortune Brandon inherited, the same fortune that paid for his education and his engagement ring, and his certainty that the world belongs to him, is soaked in exactly the kind of suffering he now inflicts so casually. Rochelle's hands trembled. What are you suggesting? Minjae closed the laptop. He looked at her with those winter-lake eyes that missed nothing. I am suggesting, he said carefully, that I can provide evidence of Brandon Whitmore's crimes to the appropriate federal authorities. I can ensure that the investigation proceeds with unusual speed and efficiency. I can make certain that his family's law firm collapses, that his personal assets are seized, that his reputation is destroyed, that he spends the next decade of his life in a federal correctional facility. Why would you do that for me? Rochelle asked. What do you want in return? Minjae was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I want nothing. That is what makes this dangerous. I don't understand. When I take payment, there are rules, Minjae explained. Boundaries. A transaction with clear terms. But when I do something for no payment, purely because I believe it is right, I step outside those rules. I become unpredictable. And unpredictable people in my position do unpredictable amounts of damage. He stood and walked to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the city below into a smear of lights and shadows. I am offering you vengeance, he said. Complete, absolute, crushing vengeance. But you need to understand what you are accepting. You are not hiring me. You are not making a transaction. You are allowing me to open a door that has no certain destination. You are trusting a man whose hands are already stained with blood to decide what justice looks like. Rochelle stood. Her legs felt unsteady. If I say yes? If you say yes, Min-jae interrupted, Brandon Whitmore will lose everything. His career, his freedom, his family's wealth, his future. He will be erased as thoroughly as he tried to erase you from his family photographs. And what happens to me? Min-jae turned from the window. That is the question, isn't it? What happens to the person who chooses vengeance over forgiveness? Who uses a monster's power to destroy their enemy? You will have to live with that choice, with the knowledge of what you became in this moment. Little did Rochelle know that in an apartment across the city, Brandon Whitmore was opening a bottle of expensive scotch, laughing with his fiancée Melissa about the pathetic architect he had demolished that afternoon, utterly unaware that his entire world was balanced on the edge of a cliff and waiting only for one woman's word to send it tumbling into an abyss from which there would be no return. Rochelle thought about her mother's voice. Baby, don't let them make you bitter. Rise above it. She thought about every teacher who had told her she didn't belong in advanced placement classes. She thought about every job interview where she was asked if she was sure she had the qualifications listed on her resume. She thought about Brandon's smile in that cafe, so casual, so certain of his right to diminish her. She thought about standing in her car, crying until she couldn't breathe, feeling small and worthless and erased. Do it, she said. Her voice was cold, final. Destroy him. Min-jae nodded slowly. Then it is done. But I need you to understand one more thing. What? In approximately 2 weeks, federal agents will arrest Brandon Whitmore. His life will end as he knows it. And when that happens, you will feel powerful, victorious, perhaps even happy. But within weeks, that feeling will curdle into something else. You will wonder if you are different from him now, if you used power as carelessly as he did, if vengeance makes you righteous or simply makes you cruel. Rochelle lifted her chin. I'll deal with that when it happens. No, Min-jae said quietly. You'll deal with it every day for the rest of your life. I know because I deal with it every day. The question is whether you will regret your choice or accept it as the price of being seen. He extended his hand. If you shake my hand, there is no going back. Brandon Whitmore's destruction begins tonight. Rochelle looked at his hand, at the scars on his knuckles, at the tattoos disappearing under his sleeve, at the physical evidence of a life lived outside the boundaries of law and conventional morality. She thought about Ji-won, who had apologized for existing. She thought about every Black woman who had ever been told to smile more, work harder, prove herself worthy, shrink herself to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold her. She reached out and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, human. It's done, he said simply. And in that moment, Rochelle Bennett felt something shift inside her. Not triumph, not quite, but a terrible relief. As if she had been holding her breath for 28 years and could finally exhale. Little did she know that across the city, in the offices of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an anonymous tip was being received about financial irregularities at Whitmore and Associates. A tip so detailed and documented that the agent reading it immediately flagged it for priority investigation. Little did she know that the wheels of justice, which moved so slowly for people who looked like her, could move with terrifying speed when pushed by the right hands. Little did she know that she had just traded one kind of pain for another, and that the cost of that trade would reveal itself only in the long, quiet hours when vengeance had been achieved and she was left alone with what she had become. Min-jae released her hand and walked to a cabinet. He poured 2 glasses of clear liquid from an unlabeled bottle. "Korean soju," he said, handing her one. "We drink to mark significant moments." "What are we drinking to?" Rochelle asked. Min-jae raised his glass. His face was unreadable. "To the women who refuse to apologize for existing," he said, "and to the men who finally learned that cruelty has consequences." They drank. The liquor burned going down, clean and sharp and bitter. Just like revenge, Rochelle thought. Just exactly like revenge. 14 days passed like a held breath. Rochelle returned to her normal life, or what remained of it. She worked on smaller projects, residential renovations for clients who appreciated her vision, who did not question her qualifications or compare her skin tone to furniture choices. She attended networking events with a smile that felt like a mask she could not remove. She slept poorly, her dreams filled with images of federal agents and courtrooms, and Brandon's face contorted in the same humiliation he had so casually inflicted upon her. She did not hear from Min-jae. The black business card remained on her kitchen counter, a silent witness to the choice she had made in that penthouse overlooking the rain-soaked city. But on the morning of the 15th day, her phone rang with a number she did not recognize. "Turn on the news," said Min-jae's voice, calm and factual. "Channel 7. He hung up before she could respond. Rochelle's hand shook as she reached for the television remote. The morning news appeared on screen, a perfectly coiffed anchor with concerned eyes and a voice trained to deliver tragedy with appropriate gravitas. Dramatic developments this morning as federal agents raided the offices of Whitmore and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious corporate law firms. Sources tell us that multiple partners have been arrested on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit tax evasion. Among those arrested is Brandon Whitmore, 32, son of the firm's founding partner. The screen showed footage of Brandon being led from his office building in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale and shocked, photographers shouting questions he did not answer. He looked small, diminished, human in a way Rochelle had never seen him. Allegations suggest a multi-year scheme involving real estate transactions and offshore accounts. The firm's assets have been frozen pending investigation. Legal experts say this could be one of the largest white-collar crime cases prosecuted in the state this year. Rochelle sat down heavily on her couch. She had asked for this. She had shaken Min-jae's hand and set this destruction in motion. She should feel triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. The news continued. Interviews with shocked clients, statements from prosecutors promising justice, footage of Brandon's fiancée Melissa leaving their shared apartment with suitcases, her face hidden behind designer sunglasses, her engagement ring conspicuously absent. Rochelle's phone buzzed. A text from Min-jae. "You wanted him destroyed. He is destroyed. What you do with that knowledge is yours alone to carry." She stared at the message until her vision blurred. Little did Brandon Whitmore know, as he sat in a federal holding cell awaiting arraignment, that the woman he had humiliated over coffee and skin tones had been the catalyst for his unraveling. That his casual cruelty had awakened something in a stranger, a dangerous man with resources and rage, and a dead sister's memory driving him toward retribution. That the world he had believed belonged to him was simply on loan, and the loan had been called due by forces he had never imagined existed. 3 weeks after the arrest, Rochelle found herself back at Meridian Cafe. She did not know why she had returned to the place where everything had begun. Perhaps she was looking for closure. Perhaps she was punishing herself. Perhaps she simply needed to sit in the space where her old life had ended, and her new one, this strange, hollow victory, had commenced. She ordered black coffee. She sat at the same table by the window. She opened her laptop without seeing the screen. "The seat taken?" Rochelle looked up. Min-jae stood beside her table, dressed not in his usual black suit, but in simple dark jeans and a charcoal sweater. He looked younger somehow. Less like a weapon, more like a man. "You're following me now?" Rochelle asked, but there was no heat in her voice. "I own this building," Min-jae said simply. "The cafe manager called when you came in. May I sit?" Rochelle gestured to the empty chair. Min-jae sat. He did not order anything. He simply looked at her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see past her careful composure to the chaos underneath. "You're not happy," he observed. "I should be," Rochelle said. "He's in jail. His family's firm is bankrupt. His fiancée left him. Everything you promised happened exactly as you said it would." "But you feel empty." "Yes," Rochelle whispered. "I watched the news every day. I saw him lose everything. And I kept waiting to feel better, to feel vindicated, to feel like the pain he caused me had been balanced somehow. But I just feel nothing." Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "May I tell you what happened to the man who rejected my sister?" Rochelle nodded. "His name was Christopher Barnes. Old money. Real estate family. The kind of man who believed the world was designed for his comfort. After Ji-won died, I spent 6 months planning his destruction. I was meticulous. Thorough. I made him lose his job, his inheritance, his social standing. I made sure everyone knew he had driven a woman to suicide with his cowardice and his family's racism." Min-jae's voice was flat, emotionless, as if recounting someone else's story. "I succeeded. Completely. He lost everything. And do you know what I felt when I saw him broken and alone?" "What?" Rochelle asked. "Nothing," Min-jae said. "Because my sister was still dead. And no amount of his suffering could bring her back or erase the fact that I had failed to protect her." Rochelle felt tears building behind her eyes. "Vengeance is a mirror," Min-jae continued. "It shows you your own face transformed by rage. And when the rage passes, you're left looking at what you've become. The question is whether you can live with that reflection." "Can you?" Rochelle asked. Min-jae smiled, but it was the saddest smile she had ever seen. "I have no choice. This is who I am now. But you still have a choice about who you become after this." "I don't understand." "Brandon Whitmore hurt you," Min-jae said. "I destroyed him for it. But his destruction doesn't heal your wound. It doesn't make you whole. It doesn't erase the years of humiliation and exclusion you've endured. It only proves that you can wield power as destructively as he did." Rochelle wiped at her eyes angrily. "So what should I have done? Just accepted it? Let him keep treating people like me as design flaws?" "No," Min-jae said firmly. "You should have demanded justice. You should have fought back. But there's a difference between justice and revenge. Justice restores balance. Revenge creates new wounds. What we did to Brandon, that was revenge. And revenge doesn't heal. It only spreads the pain to new people." "Then why did you help me?" Rochelle demanded. "If you knew it wouldn't make me feel better, why did you destroy him?" Min-jae looked away, toward the window where rain had begun to fall again, as it always seemed to in this city, as if the sky were washing away sins that could never truly be cleansed. "Because I am broken," he said quietly. "Because I have been doing this for 5 years. finding cruel men and destroying them, thinking that if I punish enough of them, I will somehow atone for failing to protect Ji-won. But the truth is that I am simply spreading my own pain like a disease, using other people's suffering as an excuse to indulge my own rage. He turned back to her, and for the first time, Rochelle saw tears in those ice-cold eyes. You deserved better than what Brandon did to you, Min-jae said. But you also deserved better than what I gave you. I gave you the tools of destruction because destruction is all I know. But you are an architect. You build things. You create spaces where people can live and grow and thrive. And I took that person and turned her into someone who drinks soju and celebrates a man's imprisonment. Rochelle sat in silence, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not the hollow victory she had been carrying, but something deeper and more painful. Understanding. Regret. The terrible recognition that Min-jae was right. What do I do now? She whispered. You decide who you want to be, Min-jae said. You can let this define you. Become someone who solves problems through destruction and power. Or you can acknowledge what happened, carry the weight of it, and choose to build something better. And you? Rochelle asked. What will you do? Min-jae stood. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plane ticket. He placed it on the table between them. I'm going back to Korea, he said, to visit my sister's grave. To tell her that I'm sorry. That I've spent 5 years trying to avenge her, when what she really would have wanted was for me to live. To be happy. To stop making the world smaller and darker in her name. Will you come back? Rochelle asked. I don't know, Min-jae admitted. Perhaps it's time for me to become someone else. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Though I'm not sure I remember how. He extended his hand. Not for a handshake this time, but palm up, offering. Rochelle took his hand. It was warm. Scarred. Human. Thank you, she said, for showing me what I was becoming. Even if it hurts to see it. Pain is how we know we're still capable of changing, Min-jae said. The day it stops hurting is the day we're truly lost. He released her hand and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, rain visible through the glass, the city gray and wet and endlessly complicated beyond. Build something beautiful, Rochelle Bennett, he said without turning around. Something that proves your worth without destroying anyone else. That's the only revenge that actually heals. Then he was gone, walking into the rain, becoming just another figure in an expensive coat, navigating the wet streets of a city full of broken people trying to make themselves whole through the breaking of others. Rochelle sat alone at her table. She looked at the plane ticket he'd left behind. Seoul, departing tomorrow, one way. She looked at her laptop, at the blank screen waiting for her to create something. She looked at her reflection in the window, at the woman she had become in the space between humiliation and vengeance. Little did she know that 6 months from that moment, she would open her own firm, Bennett Inclusive Design, specializing in creating spaces that welcomed people of all backgrounds, that challenged the aesthetic tyranny of whiteness, that proved beauty came in every shade and shape. That her first major client would be a community center in a predominantly Black neighborhood, a project that would win awards and launch her career in ways Brandon Whitmore's rejection never could have prevented. Little did she know that Min-jae would send her a postcard from Seoul. Just 4 words in careful English handwriting. I am learning again. Little did she know that she would keep that postcard on her office wall, a reminder that brokenness was not permanent, that people who had wielded power destructively could choose differently, that the most radical act was not revenge, but the decision to build something beautiful from the ashes of humiliation. But in that moment, sitting in the cafe where her pain had begun, Rochelle simply closed her laptop and made a decision. She would not forget what Brandon had done. She would not pretend the world was fair or kind or free from casual cruelties that cut deeper than their speakers intended. But she would not let his cruelty define her capacity for creation. She would not let Min-jae's darkness become her permanent residence. She would carry the weight of what she had done, the man she had helped destroy, the vengeance she had chosen, the hollowness of victory through another's suffering. And she would transmute that weight into something else, into buildings that said, "You belong here," into spaces that said, "Your skin is not a flaw," into designs that said, "Beauty has never been singular, and anyone who told you otherwise was selling something you were never meant to buy." She gathered her things. She walked out of the cafe into the rain. She let it wash over her face, cold and clean and relentless. And for the first time since Brandon Whitmore had smiled at her and compared her skin to bad interior design, Rochelle Bennett felt something other than rage or emptiness. She felt purpose. Not the purpose of destruction, but the purpose of creation. Of proving that the best revenge was not making your enemy small, but making yourself so undeniably magnificent that their judgment became irrelevant. The rain fell. The city continued. And Rochelle walked forward into whatever came next, carrying her scars and her choices and her terrible, hard-won understanding that being seen, truly seen, for exactly who you were, mattered more than every demolished enemy combined. Behind her, in a federal prison, Brandon Whitmore sat in a cell and wondered how everything had unraveled so quickly, never knowing that the woman whose skin didn't fit his family photo had been the catalyst. Never understanding that cruelty always finds its reflection, that humiliation echoes, that the world is full of dangerous angels who visit vengeance upon those who mistake privilege for invincibility. And somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, Kang Min-jae looked out an airplane window at clouds that stretched forever, thinking about his sister, about Rochelle, about all the women he had tried to save by destroying the men who hurt them, wondering if salvation could ever come through destruction, knowing now that it could not, hoping it was not too late to learn another way. The plane carried him toward home. The rain carried Rochelle toward her future. And the story that had begun with a cruel comment in a cafe ended not with triumph or tragedy, but with the quiet, difficult understanding that healing required more courage than revenge ever would. That being seen required first learning to see yourself clearly, without the distortions of others' hatred or your own rage. That justice and vengeance were not the same thing. And that sometimes the hardest victory was choosing, in the face of cruelty, to remain the person you wanted to be, rather than becoming the person your pain demanded. The rain washed the city clean. It would be dirty again by morning. But for now, the world felt new. And that was enough. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever achieved revenge against someone who hurt you, only to find the victory felt hollow? Have you ever had to choose between the satisfaction of watching an enemy fall and the harder work of building your own worth? When someone has treated you as less than because of your race, your appearance, or your background, did destroying them heal you? Or did healing come from proving to yourself that their judgment was irrelevant? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and the courage to choose creation over destruction, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.